In this session, let's primarily look at the repayment schedule, whether it is in the payment of interest or the principal. Once we have taken the loan, we have to make a schedule as to what would be the typical cash outflows from the company's perspective or from the project's perspective towards interest repayment as well as the principal repayment. So we have to make a kind of a schedule for the entire period of the loan. So that is one thing we have to picture out, because interest as such is specific to a year. Interest is a yearly expense. So whatever is the portion of interest, we will take it into the profit and loss statement, whereas principal repayment is reducing your outstanding loan. It's not an expense for the year, so we actually take this principal repayment into the balance sheet. We'll talk about the financial statements and which goes into what slightly later, but as of now, probably we first need to identify out of the borrowing whatever we have done, what is the interest and what is the principal repayment corresponding to each of the years, so that the financial statement preparation can happen comfortably on those lines. Alright, so let's get into our spreadsheet to handle the interest and the principal repayments for the loan project which we have undertaken. Okay, here this up to this part we have handled it during our construction cost. When we talked about the chapter on interest during construction period, we have made a schedule like this. So this is more talking in terms of the drawdown and probably the interest during the construction period only. So now we will have to start off with a few more elements here. I will put up what is the principal outstanding at the beginning. So principal or probably beginning principal, I'll call it as B principal. So at the beginning of the period, what is the principal outstanding? What is the interest paid, or interest paid. Similarly, I will have principal repayment, and ending principal outstanding. Ending principal outstanding. So these are the four elements I am more interested in, and I have to bring in more and more consistency in the process. So how do I bring about that? Wherever I need to identify, first of all, that particular year from where the repayments will, or from where the outstanding repayment will actually start, or even the interest payment will start. After the drawdown period, this is where the repayment will actually start, right? Which means only when the drawdown period is over, I will initiate the repayment part. But the scenario which is worth looking at is after the repayment. So which means here my outstanding principal will actually come into picture, right? my outstanding principal will actually come into picture here. So all I can create a form, but our formula, whatever we are creating, it has to be more generic, because if the drawdown period either increases or decreases, our formula should be comfortable in handling those kind of scenarios also. So from that standpoint, at least I have to take the beginning principle probably only something like this. If the drawdown something is visible, if this drawdown is greater than 0, if this value is greater than 0, I will directly put it as blank. So for those periods, if the drawdown value is greater than 0, I'll put it as blank. And if it is not greater than 0, right? If it is not greater than 0, I may have to update some calculation on that. So let me just experiment it to start with. I'll put up an X there. So which means here it is showing a blank, and across also it is showing a blank, because even the spaces are being treated as X, as greater than 0. So instead of using greater than 0, we will use is number. If this is a number, treat it as blank, otherwise treat it with an X. Let's try out now if our scenario is better. Yes. So instead of using a blank, checking for greater than 0, I will check out for if that drawdown is a number, then I will replace it with a blank, otherwise I'll do something on it. Now that something, what are the mechanisms for me? Either it has to be the outstanding principal, or it has to be outstanding principal after the total drawdown, which means for the first year, first payment, I'll have that kind of a scenario, and from the next payment onwards, I will have the ending principal of the previous period. So there are two scenarios there. So if the above one, so within this X, I will create two scenarios. If the above piece is blank, so which means if the above cell is blank, then you consider the summation of this to this. So I'll take the dollar here, which means if the above cell, so here if we are looking at it here, the cell above it, it is blank. So what it will do, if that is blank, it will do the summation from D2 to probably D10. So because of that, it will give me the outstanding principal. So if at all we are talking about the above cell being blank, it will give me the outstanding principal, and if it is not blank, it will give me the ending principal corresponding to that particular period, right? So that is what will happen in case of beginning principal. The beginning of the period principal, either it is the total outstanding loan, or after the repayment of interest and principal, whatever are the case, it would be the updated ending principal. So that is the rule we are writing. Let's try it out. So if I am dragging it down, yes, here it is coming out that the outstanding principal is 72.46, and in the next periods, because this cell is not yet updated, but at the same time we have to see even for 30 years it is showing this scenario. So I have to make sure that this part is applicable only up to the 15th year. So we have to really differentiate the drawdown period, the repayment period, all these kind of things. We have to really differentiate. Alright, so for that it's better that we create one more cell, one more column saying period. So in this period, what I would try to write out is, based on the year, I will do the classification. So if the year number is less than or equal to the drawdown period, if the year number is less than or equal to the drawdown period, I will probably write it as D, means it's a drawdown. Otherwise, if years, so if it is not D, then I am checking again for the year number less than or equal to the drawdown period, or probably let me call it as sum of the drawdown period as well as the moratorium period. If this is lesser than those two, I will call it as the moratorium period. Else, again I will check out if it is lesser than, if the interest period or if this year is less than or equal to the summation of all the three, the drawdown period or the moratorium period or the repayment period. If it is lesser than the summation of all these three, then also I will call this as the repayment period. Otherwise, I will put it as a blank. This is how I will handle this logic, that beyond the repayment period, don't put anything. So in this case, I will get that this is the drawdown period. Okay, why am I not getting the moratorium period here? Okay, here also I have to put the appropriate dollar. Right, this is something where I have to put the dollar. Now let's say when I am dragging it, I am getting, the first 2 years is the drawdown period, next 1 year is the moratorium period, and up to 15 years I have the repayment period. So now here also, before I did all this kind of a checking, I will simply put if this equal to blank, leave it as blank. This would have given me a slightly better advantage in the process. Okay, so when I'm dragging it down, at least if I can very well see that this is created only up to the year number 15. Now, the interest repayment as simple as if this principal part is blank, interest would be left as blank. Okay, if the principal is equal to blank, I will leave the interest also as blank. Otherwise, I will take the principal value multiplied by whatever is the interest assumption. Rate of interest divided by the interest, probably the drawdown as well as the interest repayment. The frequency I am taking it as the same. So because this is a quarterly repayment, I am making this kind of an assumption straightforward. So the interest repayment part is coming out at this layer, and whenever we are talking about the principal repayment, only when the period is R, only when the period is R, means it's a repayment period. So when this is equal to R only, the repayment will be applicable. So how much I would be repaying when it is equal to R, assuming that it's a equal principal repayment, right? Assuming that it is an equal principal repayment, if that is R, what I would be doing is the entire drawdowns, whatever was my total drawdown, I would be dividing by the total number of repayments. So I'll say count if in this particular region how many R's are there. So that much is the amount that I am going to pay every period, and if it is not equal to R, I'll simply put a blank. Okay, so by doing this, let's see, right from this year it is 1.5 that is going out as a principal repayment for each of the years. So basically, if I am adding all the principal repayment, it is working out to this 72.46, which is exactly the outstanding principal for us. So this is what is the principal repayment corresponding to each of the years, and we know that the principal repayment is applicable only during the principal repayment is primarily applicable only in the repayment period, not during the moratorium period. During the moratorium period, only the interest is applicable, not the principal. So the principal repayment of 1.5 crores per quarter is applicable right from the year number 4 onwards in this example. Now based on this, I can compute my ending principal, or probably here during the moratorium period I can say principal repayment is 0. Rather than putting blank across, I'll put one more rule saying if this is equal to M, put it as an explicit 0, otherwise replace it with a blank. A little bit of more clarity that during the moratorium period, probably principal repayment is not required. And to compute my ending principal, I can very well take the summation of, so if at all the principal is blank, leave it. Probably if this number is equal to blank, leave it as blank. Otherwise, do the summation of the principal as well as the negative interest paid as well as the negative principal repayment. The reason I am doing like that is a simple minus or plus may give me hash value kind of errors. using a sum formula does not give me any such kind of errors. So let me try out. The ending principal balance is something like this. Each of the periods I am getting some principal getting reduced, but what is happening is, okay, here I should not take out the interest repayment, sorry, only the principal repayment needs to be taken out, right? Because interest is a separate expense, only the principal balance I am reducing in each of the periods. So I do not bother much about the interest payment. The principal repayment, whatever I am doing, is something which I am more interested in. So for the first few years, there is no, for the first, during the moratorium period, there is no principal repayment, so only interest is what I will consider. And by the time we come to the last, there is no principal that is outstanding, almost 10 to the power of minus 14.00. It's more of a rounding up kind of an issue. To make things more and more clear, what I can very well suggest is, you select all these cells, and probably apply the general formatting feature, number based formatting, so that things become more and more clear. Okay, this is the principal outstanding each of the period, and finally you are seeing that by the end of the 15th year the loan is getting fully paid off. This much of Excel exercise, why did we do? Okay, go back to your assumptions. Probably just work out on, instead of 12 years, let's say if I have a 15-year repayment period, instead of 2 years, you have a 3-year drawdown period. When I come back here, alright, okay, let's keep the drawdown period as 2 years only, right, because we have to adjust even all the numbers above. So if I say the repayment period at least is 15 years, you could see that the numbers got updated, let's say up to the 18th year, and the principal repayment part has actually come down. And just to add a little bit more, you say that the moratorium period is 2 years. I can come back and check out that 2 years of moratorium, the principal repayments are 0 and the interest repayments are starting only after that, because the drawdown period as well as my construction period are linked. So I have to change all those assumptions in my initial sheet at the construction stage also. That's the reason we got our hash value error. But I mean, all these scenarios can very well be checked out. If I go back, probably it will talk about 19 years altogether. So all these things can quite comfortably be adjusted or played around once we visualize our formulas quite comfortably. That is one of the prime reasons we are creating the model more and more robust, so that all these kind of scenarios, in case I am able to increase my extend my repayment period by 3 more years or 5 more years, what are going to be my various scenarios for various periods. So this is one thing, and probably my bank may typically require year-wise kind of principal as well as interest repayment schedule. The reason being, the interest is what will go into your P&L statement, whereas the principal may go as a part of the balance sheet. So I may not be looking at more of quarterly kind of payments. I am more interested in terms of annual kind of representations. So probably I will make a small summary here. Year number, interest repayment part, as well as principal repayment. Only simple. So all I would be doing is, I would consider only those many years where I would consider starting from 1. I will typically check if the above number is less than the summation of all the 3 years, the drawdown period, comma the moratorium period, comma the reinvestment period. If it is less than that, I do an auto increment of that number. I do an auto increment of this number, otherwise I will leave it blank. So this kind of a slight workout is more or less required. So probably this also I'll drag for some number of periods so that I can adjust it every year. And the interest payment is nothing but, so if this cell is blank, leave it as blank. Otherwise do the summation of, sum if in this particular column where it is equal to the year number, you sum up the total interest payments. So which will come to this being the interest payment for the first year, and same way when I am dragging it across, these are the interest payments for each of the years. Similarly, I can do the same formula. If this is equal to blank, leave it as blank, otherwise do a sum if in this particular column, match it with the year number and do the summation of the principal repayment. So going with that, I get, okay, in the first year the principal repayment is 0, whereas in each of these years these are the various principal repayments that I am doing. And going ahead with this formatting, I'll say that these are the interest and the principal repayments that are possible for each of these periods. Because most of the time in our typical loan payment scenarios, we observe that the equal principal repayment is the typical scenario that we come across. And during the moratorium period, no principal repayment will occur. So I don't need to bother about the principal repayment scenario in the moratorium period. So all these things I have to reflect as a part of my model so that I can easily verify. Okay, in case I negotiate with the bank, let's say for a 15-year repayment period versus a 12-year repayment period, is there any kind of a benefit that I am going to get as far as my cash flows are concerned or as far as my profitability is concerned? So it's better to have a model which can address. So the main intention of this modeling exercise is to create a kind of awareness to you that whatever the formulas you are incorporating or whatever the model you are trying to build, it has to be robust enough that it can accommodate wide variety of assumptions, and it should be able to test any kind of change that you are trying to make to your assumption, and give you the scenario output for various situations. That is how the focus of our model should be. So I'm not saying that this is robust, but I'm just giving you the flavors of thinking that, okay, if at all my drawdown period is going to change, if at all my repayment period is going to change, is my model robust enough to produce the various scenarios which I am typically visualizing? That is what is the benefit that we can derive out of our extensively built financial model. Now we will carry this interest and principal chart also as a part of our financial statements. We will get into creating a P&L statement as well as a balance sheet, and incorporate all these things as a part of that financial statement, right? If you have any queries regarding this interest or principal repayments, how we are computing all these things, you can very well get in touch with me by giving me a call on this number, or you can even drop in an email at vamsidhar@pacegurus.com. Thanks a lot for listening to this session. Thank you very much.